Path of Exile newbie veterans Subtractem, CaptainLance9, and Palsteron just finished interviewing Path of Exile 2 game director and Grinding Gear Games co-founder Jonathan Rogers about Path of Exile 1's upcoming sequel, Path of Exile 2. Now, Path of Exile 2's closed beta was supposed to begin in just over a month on June 7th, 2024, but it has been delayed until the end of the year. Still, Jonathan is keen on speaking with absolutely as many people as possible about this upcoming ARPG and what it'll be all about. As this trio spoke with Jonathan Rogers about POE2, I took absolutely ridiculous notes and summarized the entire interview into this short video for your viewing or listening pleasure. As always, I recommend giving the entire interview a watch, but if you would like the highlights, continue on. Timestamps for each question are in the description, as is the link to the full interview on Twitch and or YouTube. Huge thanks to the newbie veteran trio for conducting this interview, and a thanks to Jonathan as well for taking on their questions. Now, without further ado, let's talk some Path of Exile 2. Question 1. WASD changed the game. What has been the feedback on it overall so far? They've definitely had a huge positive response about WASD. It surprised a lot of people at Grinding Gear Games, seriously. Jonathan thinks they had to be open-minded to the implications adding WASD would have, such as WASD perhaps having an advantage over click to move. It'll be a minimal advantage, he thinks, but worth it for the overall positive gain. They also had to make a ton of other changes because of its implementation. Since the LA event, they've been doing tons more WASD movement work, changing skills to not require a stop to use. Now, all spellcast animations now allow for movement. It's no longer a technical problem. It's now a balance and feel problem they will need to solve for. This was a ton of animation work on their end, but it's now done, especially because spells, unlike other skills, can be used with any weapon type. It's a lot of work, guys. Jonathan was a bit afraid of people thinking POE2 will be like No Rest for the Wicked. It is nothing like Path of Exile 2. They've embraced the maximum kinetic feel of combat. Path of Exile 2 is not doing that. It is not that slow at all. People look at POE2 and say they've slowed it down. It's nowhere near as slow as No Rest for the Wicked, and that is not the feel they are going for. Jonathan really stressed this point. Do not fear POE2 being as slow as No Rest for the Wicked. He does think they have an excellent feel on their attacks, even though it's super slow. Jonathan, though, does not like losing control of your character in that game. That's something they actively combat in POE2. He also dislikes the stamina system, wherein if you run out of stamina, you cannot do anything, not even dodge roll. Again, POE2 does not have systems like that and won't. Jonathan also touched on the consumables and durability systems, which were quite unforgiving and changes the feel in a way that Jonathan is not keen on implementing in games they make at Grinding Gear Games. He would like to try more of No Rest for the Wicked. He got to the end of the content and swaps between loving it and not liking it. Now this is me talking here, and he really had some more stuff to say about No Rest for the Wicked, and it seems like it has influenced how they're developing and releasing out POE2 as well. He really doesn't like releasing minimal content. He wants a maximal amount of content to hit players with that big burst Path of Exile 2 release. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. Question 2. Will POE2 be super button intensive all the way through Endgame? Eventually, you'll build to the flow state of your character just as you do in POE1. Generally speaking though, against trash mobs, Jonathan doesn't expect you to use more than 3 or 4 skills ever. There will be monsters wherein you must think, perhaps use some more skills than a few, but they're far and few in between with general packs. There is automation in the endgame for skills using spirit as well. Bosses though should always be engaging to fight. He doesn't like killing a boss in 5 seconds, and that should only happen if you're ultra geared and you're fighting the boss for the 2nd, 3rd, or 10th time. Back to the button intensity topic. With 5 flasks, multiple skills, WASD, and anything else, yes, there are a lot of buttons there. It doesn't go above Jonathan's level of comfortableness. He is unsure what to do about that if they want to keep skill variety, which they want to do. Key binding is also going to be a thing in POE2, so you can rebind your keys if necessary. Palsteron then brought up instilling orbs. These orbs automatically cause flasks to trigger upon a specific condition being met in POE1, and he was wondering if they'll be in POE2. Jonathan said he's okay with automation of flasks in the endgame, but not during the early game and campaign of POE2. Again, this is me talking. I'm kind of shocked about Jonathan's answer here. I'm unsure if he's aware how instilling orbs work in Path of Exile 1 right now, and if he understood what question Palsteron was answering, because instilling orbs in POE1 do not work on mana or life flasks. They only work on those proactive flasks that we only want up most of the time, like Quicksilver and Diamond and all that. So he may not know that instilling orbs don't work like that in POE1, and I don't know if they'll actually be in POE2, because even though he said he's okay with some sort of flask automation, I do think he still wants people to be using those life flasks as they do in POE1 right now. It's more so reactionary than proactive. Question 3. How are you changing the flask system? Post LA, they would like to ensure player state matters more. In POE1, it is easy for flasks to be infinite, essentially. They sought to address this by making white monsters not drop flask charges in Path of Exile 2. This made players constantly travel back to town to refill flask charges. In Elden Ring, limited flasks are fine. In PoE, people don't like that. They almost went full hardcore and removed town portaling in PoE2 entirely in response to all the player problems. That would have been wild. Then they decided after much debate to walk this idea and their other flask changes back. In PoE1, all monsters give a single flask charge. They don't like that in PoE2. Thus, flask charges are not guaranteed to grant one per kill. Instead, they are giving out flask charges based on monster effectiveness. Small monsters might have a 30% chance to grant one flask charge, while larger monsters might grant 2 or more flask charges every time you kill them. Their goal is to balance flasks to ensure if you have the right flask setup, you'll never need to go back to town to refill flasks. And this is excellent. Great to hear. I totally agree. I did not like having to go back to the well constantly throughout an area. Maybe I could have lived with like once every area or during a boss fight, but I like to hear that if you gear properly, you won't need to constantly TP out and go back to town to refill your flasks. That's awesome. Good move grinding your games. Thank you. Question 4. Is POE2 going to fall along the same lines as POE1 in terms of build design and philosophy? Most definitely it will. The only real restriction is certain skills are restricted to certain weapon types. The main thing with the current marketing is that they're presenting POE2 as having archetypes. It's much simpler for a new user to intake information in this manner compared to how POE1 has evolved. This will be easier to onboard new people, and it's why they present information as they currently do. They expect absolutely insane builds to pop off, especially with the weapon swap capabilities. Plus, you can now choose any attribute you'd like from attribute nodes now on the passive skill tree, which allows for further sandbox capabilities for us wild PoE players. Another example, the uncut support gem UI has been updated to allow you to select a socket for one of the skills you have currently socketed. Then it presents all the available options for that particular skill and socket. This is further helping the new player experience, but also showcasing people, hey, there are a lot of options here. When they are designing skills in POE2, they are constantly trying to expand the horizons of possibility for each skill. They do not want to shoehorn people into builds, but they also want to have some obvious options presented for those not seeking to innovate and chase the internet for new, awesome builds. And as we'll see later, they also may be inserting some T-gems into the game to start off. Question 5. Will builds able to beat Endgame require lots of investment and innovation? Jonathan is unsure the best way to answer this question. It depends on your definition of endgame. No one feels like they should not be able to do something with what they're trying to build, but it does happen. They'll likely do it by feel and see what occurs. There will definitely be drop-off for people who use the builds that just fit together easily, but you should definitely be able to beat the campaign with a basic build if you're not an idiot. What a quote by Jonathan. Question 6. Will third-party tools still be needed for a smooth experience for many players? Jonathan has mixed opinions on this, and it depends on the situation. First of all, the community will always make tools. There will always be a path of building, for example. The question becomes, how much should be in the game? Jonathan likes adding stuff into the game that doesn't take you out of the game. Anything that feels like the game is playing you instead of you playing the game will not be added. In the case of POB, it will never be in the game client because it's a way to check your items without you actually getting them. You should get the item before you can test how it works. With that being said, more tools for finding out what items you already do have are on the list for grinding your games. They like that. In the case of Awakened PoE Trade, Jonathan does feel like there is room for something like that in the game. However, he does not think that's the biggest problem of trade. That's the instant buyouts, which will be solved in PoE2 and eventually probably PoE1. After that, then he's into it, even if he's a bit hesitant on it. Additionally, they will be improving the way they calculate damage in PoE2, and they will be stating assumptions being made in the tooltip too. For example, AoEs. It'll say how many enemies you're targeting for the DPS being fed back to you in the game client. They then spoke about target dummies. This is more of a Chris thing. He does not like people being able to sit and calibrate against a non-enemy. In PoE2, there will be damage numbers up above the health bar, Elden Ring style, but no target dummies. To finish this off, Grinding Your Games would love to hide as much information as possible on the server side. They know if info is client side, people will find it. If he had some time, Jonathan would go in and try to hide as much as possible to keep in the mystery. Question 7. What do you want the endgame loop in PoE to be? Overall, Jonathan thinks the loop should be similar to PoE1. As far as mistakes in PoE1's endgame loop, he liked the endgame more as it was 4 years ago, although he cannot finger the exact changes that made him dislike the current endgame more. The overall approach to PoE2's endgame is essentially similar to PoE1, it's just a question of the specific details thus far. What an absolute wild take by Jonathan. Jonathan wants to go back to the days of Watchstones and Conquerors, when you had 32 or 64 Watchstones. This is a wild man. Let's not go back there. Let's keep in the Atlas passive skill tree and what we have now. It's so much better. T17's rock. Question 8. Will PoE2 have more borrowed power leagues like PoE1? Well, in the beginning, there will be lots of room to expand character power in PoE2. PoE1 is so much larger. They cannot keep bringing in permanent power because it's already so massive. It'd be at infinite scaling right now if they continued to do that. Totally makes sense. He's right here. Imagine if we had crucible trees in the game alongside charms and all the crap that we have now. Oh my goodness gracious, it would be absolute insanity. Question 9. What will the skill tree be for in PoE2? The skill tree will be able to help you specialize in something you already have a base in. Notables are more interesting in PoE2 as masteries are gone as well. They don't want nodes on the tree that all players must get, which is a trap the PoE1 passive skill tree fell into. They're also removing many weapon-specific nodes and making them more general and adding in conditional nodes as well. Keystones are remaining the same in PoE2, huge nodes with an upside and a downside that drastically change your build. Chaos Annihilation is confirmed to be in PoE2. Jonathan also confirmed cluster jewels will likely not be in the game at the start. Jewels in general do exist, although the stats you get from them will change. He does like the cluster jewel system though, and thinks it'll be in PoE2 at some point. Oh no, when Jonathan said they're adding conditional nodes into the passive skill tree, all I could think about was damage on Tuesdays from Diablo 4. Jonathan, Path of Exile 2 team, please do not do this in any regard. Please don't do that. Question 10. Will party play be easier to drop into in PoE2? He does think it's important. Due to the synergy between skills and combos, party play should definitely be improved. Question 11. Could you give us any unique item you're excited about in PoE2? He is sure he shouldn't share any uniques here, but he loves when uniques change the world around them. Wait, he'll spoil one now. The rat's nest in PoE2 has actual rats that fall out of your helmet in PoE2 and go into corpses and do crazy stuff. Every single unique won't have this sort of stuff, but many will. Oh, okay, here's another one. Red Beak glows when your life is below 50% because that's when its cool effect starts to occur. Those sorts of triggers are all over uniques in PoE2, and that is awesome. Question 12. Can you expand on Magic Find in PoE2? Certain slots will have Magic Find in PoE2. Yes, it'll exist. There is a faction split at Grinding Your Games about Magic Find as well. The argument for it is it's another way for you to optimize your character after you beat a boss or reach a peak. It's another scaling factor for those uber players. They like 3 axes: damage, defenses, and Magic Find. He is willing to be persuaded on this topic. He and Palsteron then debated on it for a while. It boiled down to the usual Magic Find discussions. It's a heated issue we've discussed a ton. Some players don't like replacing powerful gear with Magic Find gear. They like to make super strong characters that are strong. Other people love Magic Find. Grinding Gear games like this because it adds another angle to optimize your character. That's it. They then continued to talk about Magic Find for another 20 minutes, with Jonathan concluding he would speak internally with the team about it again. Question 13. Will POE2 be balanced around trade and the economy, or more so the solo self-found playstyle? He has always felt trade is super important, and so has Chris Wilson. So long as there is that feeling, trade does have an advantage in an online game. Certainly though, they are trying to involve their systems to allow players to get their items outside of trade. Question 14. How will item crafting and use evolve in POE2? Well, Scowl Rings are gone in POE2. Bases have become far more valuable in the economy, so you'll need multiple bases to craft a perfect item. It's a way to make all item rarities more valuable, instead of just tossing out basically all items once you have the base you desire. Dropped rares will have 3 to 6 modifiers as a rare, but alchemy orbed rares will always have 4 mods by default. How interesting. Quick break just to say, if you're watching this video and enjoy the content, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It helps a ton. Thank you. Also, shout out to all these rad exiles who support the channel. You are all divine. Question 15. Is there any concern the POE2 project is too big? The problem is there's a reason they gave it such a ridiculous scope. It comes down to them wanting there to be a game that is as large as POE1 because anything less than that will be a downgrade. They want it to be a substantial, bigger game. They're doing what they feel is the minimum to achieve that, with a far higher quality standard. He is honestly unsure what they could have done better to push it out faster. Everything they've done feels like it was necessary to do. There is a bit of content that is cut, but a ton will be there. He mentioned seeing people complain about Diablo 4 not having enough content at launch and people's opinions on that. He wants to blow people away and ensure expectations are exceeded. He doesn't want to put out a demo for POE2. He played No Rest for the Wicked recently, as mentioned before, and he reached the end of the content and was disappointed. He thought there would be crafting, cool bosses, and more, but there wasn't. He doesn't want that for POE2. When it releases, they want a ridiculous amount of content in the game, not something less than spectacular. They don't want a large alpha or demo though, because they want to segment these testing periods to accurately segment out feedback. They want a group of people who've only played Diablo 4 before, people who've only played PoE before, people who've only played other action games before, and so on and so forth. Honestly, Grinding Your Games is on fire with this stuff. This is an excellent answer and it makes total sense, and I wish everybody could hear this. Spread this message out to everyone when they're asking, why is Path of Exile 2 delayed? Why are we not all testing it in the alpha or the beta on June 7th? This is why, and honestly, let them cook, as I've said in my prior videos. Question 16. Is there any work being done on consoles for POE2? There will be more said later. He cannot talk about it right now. He cannot be cavalier about it. He is sorry. And the rest of these questions, everyone, are going to be pretty fast-paced. They were short with short answers. Question 17. Do you like stepping stone items? No, he doesn't. Not a fan, and likely not going to be many in POE2. There might be a few, but it's definitely not a focus for the design team. Question 18. Is there any concern about skills causing movement like the Sorceress Ice Meteor? Some skills change how they move depending on where you target. Generally speaking, the movement being a part of the skill doesn't feel bad because the movement is a part of what you would like to be doing. Question 19. Minions? Still to announce later. Question 20. Transfigured Gems? Yes, they will be in Path of Exile 2. Question 21. Ascendancies. POE1 versus POE2? They've shown stuff in the past, but they've evolved quite a bit over time. He would like to ensure they have many aspects that change your character, beyond just changing a stat, sort of like how uniques are being designed in POE2. Despite CaptainLance9 trying, Jonathan would not give an example. Question 22. Is POE2 going to be as spiky as POE1 in terms of gameplay? The goal is for that to not happen in POE2. The scaling in POE1 is algorithmically scaling super high, and that hikes degens to extreme levels. They're trying to not go for that route in POE2. Question 23. Will there be a lore connection between POE1 and POE2? Yes, there are tons of references and characters that return. They don't want to alienate non-POE1 players too much, but all the references for POE1 players should be there. They also won't retcon too much. Oh, Kitten Cat Noodle will not be happy about this. Question 24, will we get lots of quality of life in POE2 as we are getting in POE1? Actually, the POE2 work is inspiring the POE1 changes. And that was it. Jonathan had a job interview to get to. He's interviewing someone else. Don't worry, everyone. Now, what are your thoughts on this particular interview with Jonathan Rogers about Path of Exile 2? Did you find any of it particularly juicy, or are you just keen on getting your hands on POE2? If you'd like more interview highlights such as this about Path of Exile and other games, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you don't, it's possible I'll be exiled from the POE community forever. Seriously, if you do enjoy these types of interview summaries, I've done one for every single POE2 interview thus far. They can all be found in the playlist on screen now. Or if you'd like to watch a full interview, in particular the one I conducted with Jonathan Rogers, it's right here too. Give it a watch, you'll enjoy it, I am sure.